Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Kielder Observatory podcast. Coming from Kielder Observatory, situated in the Northumberland Dark Sky Park in northern United Kingdom. I'm Ian Brannan, and joining me in this episode is science communicator Ishbel Wright and our Director of Astronomy, Dan Pye, to have a look particularly at what you can see in the night sky as the nights get a little lighter in the UK, heading towards the summer solstice, of course, in June. We also speak with Melanie King, who is an astrophotographer, an artistic astrophotographer, with a particular specialism in using traditional forms of taking photographs. So not using your digital cameras, but doing it the old-fashioned way. And we'll talk about some of her images and how you can take some interesting pictures as well in the old-fashioned format in just a little while. But first, let's start off by having a look at what's been happening at Kielder Observatory recently, and also what there is to look out for in the night sky as we move through May in towards June. Dan, welcome along. Nights are getting lighter then, Dan. What is there to look out for the budding astronomer? Because the dark skies are not as dark as they usually are, let's face it.
Well, it's known as the Great Southern Migration now. Where astronomers, if they want to do astronomy, we've got to go south. We've got to go further down the globe in order to be able to get our dark skies. So still get bits of that in the southernmost tip of England. And that's really good, actually, because if we go to the southernmost points of England now, we're going to start to see the Milky Way coming into view, and it's going to be quite nice a little bit later in the night. And certainly if you were to go places like Spain on your summer holiday, you've got places that you could go to escape the light pollution of your wonderful tourist destinations and see a beautiful dark sky, particularly if you were heading to Tenerife this summer as well. So always an opportunity to take the summer or as a stargazing opportunity in other countries. But here in the UK, we were kind of restricted to our bright objects, the moon, some planets. Mercury is at its greatest eastern elongation on the 29th of May. Greatest western elongation on the 29th of May, which means it's going to be at its highest point above the horizon in the morning sky. So nice and early in the morning, just before sunrise, we'll be able to see Mercury coming up there. So a good time of year to see that. And also, we're starting to approach noctilucent cloud season. Oh yes, and we love noctilucent clouds. It is, yeah, absolutely. Noctilucent clouds are amazing. These are little particles of dust in our atmosphere, often from entering meteors. So entering space rock creates these beautiful clouds of dust and ice, which reflect sunlight beautifully and illuminate the night sky. Beyond midnight usually is the best time to see these, midnight through to 2 a.m. Is when they're at their brightest, and from mid-May through to beginning of August, mid-August. And they literally do look like glowing clouds in the night sky. That's what they're named, and that's what they look like. They look very odd because you realise that, oh, hang on a second, it's midnight. Why is there some clouds that are bright blue? What's going on here? And that's what it is. It's a bit of dust and ice particles in our atmosphere reflecting sunlight from the other side of the planet. So that to look forward to.
Yeah, something to look forward to there, the noctilucent clouds. Conversely, though, the aurora, that's moving away from us now a little bit, isn't it? Because it has been quite an active period for the Northern Lights. A lot of people seeing them, not just in Northumberland, but right across the northeast, right across the UK, even down to the southern UK. So they have been very active, but we're getting away from that time of year now, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be challenging for us to see the aurora as we start to get into these lighter nights now. So yeah, we're heading out of aurora season for sure. If you want to see some aurora now, good places to go for that is Tasmania, Southern Island, New Zealand. They're heading into their winter time, so it's getting darker for them now. So fancy a long trip on an aeroplane? That's where you're going to see some aurora. So
yeah, well, the aurora will be back later on in the year, all being well, as we get towards the end of the summer and in towards autumn. So it will be back before you know it. But we've got the summer to look forward to first. Meanwhile, Ishbel, you've been in prison. Is that what I read? Did I read that right?
So over the last 2 months, me and my colleague Finn have been going into HMP Northumberland to start an initiative to engage the prisoners in the rehabilitation education programme for getting into science, and also we've paired it with writing. So we've also got a writer who's coming in to do some workshops with them as well, to create some poetry inspired by astronomy, by the vastness of space. And we saw one of the poems actually, and it was heartbreaking. It was really good.
And so what's been the general reaction from the people you've been working with in prison then, from the prisoners, from the staff? What's been the reaction to this? Because obviously I imagine something quite different to what they've usually been used to in terms of their education and so on.
So I think it's been quite positive. The first time we went in, we had a very large group and sat down, kind of like you do in primary school, with like a big assembly, and we had presentation and handed out some booklets on space, and they were really into it. I mean, we had an hour and a half to fill, I think, and the original presentation's only about 40 minutes, so we were like, oh, this might be difficult to fill. And no, we were talking right up until the end with all their questions on, they got really into like dark matter and space, and like there were a lot more simple questions, but some really complex questions as well. And they were really keyed into and interested about it, because it's not something that's taught an awful lot at schools, and it's not something that you get to learn an awful lot about. And I think it was something that they enjoyed being in the classroom for, because a lot of them are there to just catch up on basic English and basic mathematics skills, and having something that's a little bit more interesting than addition and subtraction is caring about it because it relates to science. So it's kind of inspiring them to want to be there and come to class and care a little bit about it and more. I'm sure that there's a little bit for everyone in astronomy. So I thought it was really cool to do.
Yeah, it's something very, very different as well, and well done for doing that, and that no doubt continues as well in the background. Of course, there's plenty of sessions coming up at Kielder Observatory as we head through the summer. Of course, they're starting to fill up a little bit now. The kids' sessions returning through the holidays, but there's plenty that you can book ahead to and find out how you can come and visit us at Kielder Observatory online at kielderobservatory.org, and you can also inquire about if you're looking for any community outreach or want to have a school visit or whatever it is, then again, details online, kielderobservatory.org. The Kielder Observatory podcast. I'm Ian Brannan. Dan Pye, Director of Astronomy, and Ishbel Wright, Science Communicator at Kielder Observatory, are with us. And our special guest this month is Melanie King, who is an artistic photographer with a particular specialism in the field of astrophotography, but also it's more about the way that the photographs are processed and imaged, because these days many of us have great cameras, even just in our pockets on our mobile phones, or you might have quite a big DSLR, and then you edit your photos in Photoshop. But remember in the olden days when it was all about going into dark rooms and doing the old processing there and enlarging the pictures from the negatives and all that kind of stuff? Then I'm sure you do remember that, but many people don't. And this sort of way of making photographs is perhaps not as popular, obviously, as it used to be, particularly in astrophotography terms. But Melanie King is one such photographer who is very much keeping that flame alive, and she joins us to tell us about some of her work now, which looks absolutely stunning. But thanks for joining us, Melanie. Start by telling us about your processes, first of all, and how you do your photographs.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Melanie King. I'm a photographer, primarily working in analog and alternative photography processes. And my work that I've been doing recently is taking analog photographs of the night sky using analog film and things like that. So actually, I've been doing a PhD for the past 7 years, which is kind of focused on this subject. And I'm really interested in that kind of idea of the light traveling for millions of years before reaching film, and then being able to kind of tangibly hold that film So that's kind of the nexus of what my research is about. And so I've been to lots of dark sky areas, been to places in Iceland and Ireland and Spain. But I've also done little residencies with observatories. So I did one with Kielder Observatory, working with a guy called Theo Schlichter, and we were able to kind of mount my film camera onto the telescope and take some photographs of the moon and take photographs of stars like Arcturus, using their film camera. So yeah, and now I've kind of moved into this area. I'm working with more sustainable photographic processes. So previously I was working with kind of standard developer, and now I'm moving into an area where I'm making my own developer out of plant-based options like coffee and seaweed with the sea and things like that.
Wow. Okay. So really, you're spending a lot of time in the classic dark room then, because obviously that's something that you don't see so much these days, and so you're spending your time in the dark photographing, and then more time in the dark making these things become a reality.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's kind of one of the things I'm talking about, is that I spend a lot of time kind of out in the dark sky areas and working. I'm sure you guys know, working in that kind of environment is a bit tricky because you're like feeling around for your shutter release, and you kind of tune into different things in the landscape that you wouldn't usually in a kind of daytime environment. And then I've also been looking at what it's like to work in the dark room and kind of talking a little bit about that, and how you've got a similar kind of light quality. So you're working with your hands a lot more and going by the sense of touch and smell a lot more. So yeah, I've found it interesting to draw parallels between the two.
And where did your interest in all things celestial come in, I suppose? Because obviously it's a big part of your work, but clearly you have a natural interest in space and the universe and planets and the moon and things yourself.
It's actually from fear. So I used to, when I was about 8 years old, I used to lay in bed thinking about like the distance of stars and the size of stars, and kind of like at that point I didn't really understand much about how the universe works, and I'm not saying that I do now, but I knew a lot less then. But yeah, I kind of was thinking about infinity and kind of vast distances, and it made me feel quite scared and frightened. And then as I did my arts education, I had some lecturers who were kind of talking about how they confront their fears through their artistic practice. And then it became more of like a fascination and like this endless area of interest, because yeah, there's so many things being discovered all the time, and yeah, I find that really like overwhelmingly fascinating rather than overwhelmingly terrifying.
And as a photographer, it's all about light, of course, and what you're capturing is unique. You know, this orb of light, left its origins sometimes millions of years ago and has travelled through space and lands up in your camera.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I really enjoy the fact that when I'm working with the film, the photon has kind of touched that silver gelatin material, and that I can tangibly work with that. And also in one of my recent projects, I was looking at like the origin of silver and platinum in the universe. And how that can only be made in stellar events. So I was kind of excited by the idea of silver being made in kind of these high energy supernova explosions, and then also that it's meeting the light from another star, which is, yeah, kind of mind-blowing.
I've just had a small crisis in my mind. Yeah. No, I've just had a small crisis because I was thinking about the way that our eyeball takes light, and it's able to figure out what colour light is based on the wavelength. And then I was thinking, well, how does photographic paper know that? Or how does something that you capture in a photograph with know what colour it is? Is it able to almost take the wavelength and read the wavelength and go, okay, that's the colour that should be? How does that work? For some reason, that doesn't make sense in my mind. And I don't know if it's something that we're going to resolve now, but it's just a crisis that I've just suddenly realised I've had.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that fascinating as well, like the idea of that light travelling into your retina, and then, yeah, that your brain processes the information. Just find that, yeah, fascinating.
Going from obviously having your interest in this and then taking the photographs and as you do, how did that then become exhibitions and things like that you've done? Because you do the exhibitions of your work, a number of them. How does that then sort of manifest itself into a professional level, and you decide that this is the topic for you, and this is what you're going to do your exhibitions about?
I would say that it kind of happens in a different way round. So I kind of make the work often, and then exhibitions come along that are kind of curatorially looking at that area. So, for example, I did a exhibition as part of Moonlight at the Hasselblad Foundation, and that was all artworks around the moon, and that was curated by a curator called Dr. Melanie Vanderbroek. And then I also had a exhibition at KU Leuven in Brussels in Belgium, and that was all about the Big Bang. So they were kind of interested in works that were to do with the dynamic nature of the universe. So they were really interested in some of my kind of star trails images, and I have a time lapse that's on 60mm film of the night sky as well that they were interested in. So yeah, generally it tends to be I make the work, and then other people come around and say, oh, that kind of fits well into our exhibition, or adds a different kind of part of the conversation, I would say. But then, yeah, I kind of things like I had the project which is called Precious Metals, which is kind of about that cosmic silver idea. That was something that I worked on for about a year and a half, and then I had an opportunity to have a solo exhibition at the end, and so I chose works that were kind of taking you on a story through the different elements of things that I wanted to talk about.
And how do you go about, obviously people now are much more used to digital processes, and you've got a really powerful camera often in your pocket now on your phone, and it can do all sorts of things through various apps and time lapse and stuff, and that's all well and good, but you're doing it the old school way more often than not on film and developing it. So when you're doing star trails, is it just a case of keeping the exposure open and leaving it on there, or are you putting multiple shots together? What's your processes?
Yeah, so it's always doing it as a long exposure rather than doing any kind of stacking, although I think that would be quite interesting. And I was kind of inspired, there's a book called Picturing the Cosmos by Elizabeth Kessler, which talks about contemporary astronomical images being composite, so different light frequencies and things like that. And out of response to that, I was interested as kind of like a question, like how you would go about making an astronomical image with a limited amount of mediation and without making composites. So my PhD kind of research kind of came out of that, and it's a question I've been trying to answer ever since. But yeah, I have tried composite astronomical photography as well, and I have enjoyed that as well. I just find it interesting to experiment with, thinking about as limited mediation as possible.
Honestly, my only experience with darkrooms is watching Funny Face, the musical with Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire. And they just, they put the film in the buckets, and then, it goes, you get the one that just goes green, and then the one that just goes red, and the one that yellow, and at the end it produces one picture. So I know it's the primary colours layered upon each other, but how does the paper know which bits to dye? Interesting question. I'm not sure.
So as far as I understand it from like a black and white level, like the light comes in and wherever the light hits it goes dark, and there's kind of like a tonality. So it's all in negative. So interestingly, like colour photography and colour film photography, that is, as far as I understand it, negative colour. So it's kind of, when you're working in a colour darkroom, you're often working to the opposite, which is fascinating. So well, yeah, so I'm no expert in colour photography, so I'm not the oracle here. But when you go into a colour darkroom, if you have too much yellow in your print, then often you add yellow instead of taking it away on the enlarger. So it's like whatever you would think you need to do, you kind of do the opposite. So one of the main reasons at the moment particularly is sustainability. So colour chemicals are much more toxic because they have like a bleach stage and then they have to be at a certain temperature as well. And with black and white chemistry, it is still not great for the environment, but you can start making plant-based developers. So the things that I'm using, like seaweed developer and coffee developer, they're much better for the environment, but they only really work on black and white at the moment. So one of those reasons. And also because, again, I was thinking about the kind of limited mediations and, that is another step, I think, moving into the colour photography. But it's also kind of like an aesthetic thing as well. And maybe trying to think about being slightly different to a lot of contemporary astronomical images that are around at the moment, like just being slightly...
Yeah, they do focus on getting an awful lot of colour, and people go, wow, is that what it really looks like? And you're like, no. No, not really. People have played with the filters a lot there. But the images you produce they're hauntingly beautiful. How do you come up with producing ideas like that? Because I've seen stuff like this, actually capturing it, no idea where to start with that idea, or like even just having that process of this would make a good photograph.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I wanted to make clear in a lot of the photographs, the black and white photographs, is that I wanted to include the landscape in the photograph. So yeah, when I'm going to these different locations to take photographs of the night sky, I'm really keen to kind of make that link between things that are on the Earth also being part of the universe as well. So it's not just me looking up at the night sky, it's kind of bringing it all together. So I try and frame my photographs in that way, so I have the landscape kind of included in the image. And now I'm moving into kind of, as I say, more plant-based materials. I actually would use some of the plants within the landscape to make the image as well. So yeah, I'm very interested in, like, as you might have guessed, the materiality of the things around us, whether that's like silver in space or whether that's like the phenolic benefits of plants and how they can affect the image as well. So yeah, it's all kind of interconnected.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and just on the plant-based stuff. So, have you noticed a difference in the kind of results that you get from plant-based stuff versus the lesser plant-based stuff? I'm not sure what the lesser plant-based stuff would be, but
yeah. So all of them have different effects. So if you use like a hydroquinone-based developer, often you can get really clear, crisp results, but also even within that, you can use different developers to get different effects. So things like coffee is a really like famous plant-based developer. It's called Caffeinol C because it's made out of coffee, vitamin C, and soda crystals, and that can make very clear, crisp effects. Oh yeah, yum. But things like seaweed gives it kind of like a misty effect, which is really interesting. That has like a kind of effect on the final image. And then things like mint have a kind of like softer results. So yeah, all different plants have different phenol levels and different things within them that can affect the final image.
I always have loads of mint left over. So what you're saying is I can make some developer out of that, and then
absolutely, and it smells amazing. That's like my favourite developer because it smells like a really nice cocktail, but don't drink it.
No, don't drink it. I actually first when I tried to be a student, I started studying photography at university. And I did black and white photography first, and spent a lot of time developing things in the darkroom. And I used to love the smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was kind of like a vinegary smell that really got up your nose, and I really enjoyed that. But mint would probably be more pleasant.
Yeah.
And so, what about the future plans for yourself then, Melanie? What are you working on now, and what are you looking to work on with regards to anything space related over the coming year, shall we say?
So at the moment, I'm working on a new project in the Peak District. So I'm currently in Manchester, and I'm going up into the Peak District to take photographs that I'm then going to make into cyanotypes, which is a kind of 19th century technique. And then I'm going to use plants to affect the image. Some of those may be astronomical, they may not be. And then I haven't actually taken photographs on my own telescope using my film camera. So I think over the next year, I'd really like to start doing that. I live in a seaside location in Ramsgate, and it's actually quite dark, and I get quite a good view of the sky from there. So I'm going to give that a go.
I was going to say, what's your favourite thing to look at through a telescope?
I would say probably the Ring Nebula or a globular cluster. The Ring Nebula, just because when I've seen it, it actually looks quite blue. I don't know whether that was atmospheric effect or whether that is what it should look like. But also globular clusters, because they're so massive and they just seem like such interesting objects where all the stars are held in a gravitational pull with one another. Yeah, I find that absolutely fascinating. How about you guys?
Globular clusters, one of the best things. And my favourite thing is actually Vega or Sirius, which are the two of the really, really bright stars, but it's because through a telescope they look like a disco ball. They just twinkle and flicker. So you couldn't really pick. Actually, you could. Someone's told me this, where if you do a long exposure on one of the really bright ones that's changing colour a lot because of the atmospheric effects on the light as it travels through our atmosphere, you can actually catch different colours as you do a trail. If you do a figure of 8 or something, it turns different colours. Every shot is different, which I thought would always be really interesting to get. But I am so bad at taking photographs that I could never achieve that myself. But it looks like it might be fun.
If you love the Ring Nebula, you'll love a little one called the Blue Snowball. And this one is really, really blue. If you haven't seen it before, it's a little bit smaller than the Ring, but it is really, really blue compared to the Ring. It's a beauty. And the same kind of thing, little planetary nebula. But my favourite one is of course the Hairy Eyebrow Galaxy, which we so frequently mention on this podcast.
Right. Better get the scope out then.
And there's barely a month goes by without a mention of a hairy eyebrow. And there it is.
It is a good one. And it's visible right now as well, actually. Good time of year to see it, see the hairy eyebrow. In fact, Ishbel, did you see the hairy? You've seen it recently, haven't you? Have we looked at the hairy eyebrow?
I don't think I have, actually.
Oh, that's a shame.
No, every time I've been at the Observatory, I've been played with clouds as of late. We've had the planets, which have been way more interesting to look at than finding galaxies.
No, the hairy eyebrows.
No offense to
better.
galaxies, they are beautiful to find. Or the swimming alligator cluster.
Oh yeah, it's one of Ellie's favourites.
That's a new one that Ellie's found that we've been trying to find and work out. Does it really look like a swimming alligator, or is someone just making this up?
Yeah.
You don't sound entirely convinced, but maybe on a clearer night.
I need to see it on a really clear night where it's pristine and all the stars are properly there, and then I think it might be. I mean, if you look at some of the constellations, they definitely don't look like what they're meant to be. So it's closer than most.
Yeah, that's a lot of what astronomy is about, I think. Starting out optimistic and hoping you find what you're hoping for.
Optimism.
That's what we like. There's a bit of optimism in astronomy, and you definitely need that. Well, look, it's been great speaking with you, Melanie. Keep up the great work. And if people want to check out your work online, because I realise that a podcast is not the greatest medium, perhaps, for showing photographs on, unfortunately. But if people want to check out your work for themselves or get in touch with you, how do they do that? Where can they find you online?
So if you go on my website, melaniek.co.uk, you can see lots of my artwork on there, or you can go on my social media, which is Melanie Cat King with a K for Instagram and Melanie K King on Twitter. Okay,
good stuff. So there's the details. And Melanie, all the best for your future projects and, of course, your current ones. And thanks for joining us this month on the Kielder Observatory podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really fun.
And thanks to you for listening as well this month. We're back very soon with another episode. And in the meantime, you can keep up to date with everything happening at Kielder Observatory on the main website, kielderobservatory.org. And keep up to date with what's happening on a daily basis on social media as well, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've got regular posts on there updating you on the things that we're up to and also the things that we've seen at Kielder Observatory. And, of course, keep your eyes peeled for those noctilucent clouds as we head in towards the summer months. Whilst the nights might be getting lighter, there are things that you can see only at this time of year, and those are just one example. And also, don't forget to check out the available sessions that we've got for you to come up and visit us in person as well, because that's what we want to do. We want to see you in person and show you the things that you can see in the sky, in the dark sky park at Kielder. There's plenty of sessions available, some of which are before it gets dark as well, especially for kids particularly, that happen earlier in the day. So have a look at those and book ahead for the school holidays. Again, all the availability is up on the website, kielderobservatory.org. And until next time, thanks for joining us, and we'll speak to you very soon on the next Kielder Observatory podcast.